Hi, everyone. Welcome to How to Write the Future podcast. I'm your host, Beth Barany. I'm an award-winning science fiction and fantasy writer who helps other writers finish their books and get them published. I also help creative entrepreneurs build their businesses. And I'm passionate about thinking about the future, putting it into my stories, and encouraging other people to think about how they want to evolve and use their fiction for what's the next step in humanity? And of course, it's not just one thing. So I love talking to lots of different people. So today I have as my guest La Bourgeois. Hi, La.
Hey.
I am going to read your bio so everyone can get to know you a little bit. And then we're going to dive into our questions. All right, everyone, get to know La a little bit. La Bourgeois is a Kaizen Muse certified creativity coach, end of life doula, and author. Her readers delight in her Diary of a Lesbian Housewife and find inspiration and book reviews at The Thriving Creative. So, welcome again, La. So glad to have you here.
So glad to be here.
We could just talk creativity and book recommendations and also about your book. Before we turned on record, I was noodling around the idea of talking to you about creative flow because you are a Kaizen Muse certified creativity coach. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that means and any advice you have for a writer like myself who's had a break from writing only a few weeks because I was so busy with some other projects. But here I am restarting a place I've been in many, 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 many times. But I'm always having to reconnect and kind of come into present time and reorient myself. And I have a whole lot of practices around that. So I was wondering if you too had some advice for writers like myself who want to reconnect to their work and also maybe in a fresh way because my project is changing. And that's often what happens after a break. So that's a lot.
All right, let's start off with just what is a creativity coach? And really, the Kaizen Muse style of creativity coaching has to do with unlocking your creativity in a way that affects, you can apply this sort of coaching to almost any situation because what it does is it helps you to think differently and engage your imagination as well as empowering you to overcome the obstacle. So we spend a lot of time going into what things have worked for you in the past, what you might imagine could work for you. And then if we run out of all of those things, then I start chiming in. And people have worked with me to do things like from reigniting their creative spark, finding their way back to that creative passion that they had loved so much and had just kind of fallen out of love with. To, I had one woman who contacted me because she wanted some help with interior design. She was doing some interior design and the energy flowed where it flowed. And she ended up, actually, we did relationship coaching and she found a boyfriend. There's just all of these different spaces that creativity coaching can help with. A lot of my knowledge comes from being an entrepreneur for most of my life, as well as being an author and writer and having done that research to know what it takes to do that. But most of the information actually comes from the client. So I don't have to know a lot about that field. That said, reconnecting and reflowing into connection with your work. The way that I have always done this, I call it tricking yourself into a creative habit because I will look at something that I know is like the best thing for me to do and I will immediately rebel and not do it. I'm a horrible little goblin like that. And it's just what happens. So I have to trick myself. And the ways that I trick myself are to really let myself see what I want to create. So first I select the goal, and I know what I want to reconnect with. Then I select a teeny tiny itty bitty step, the smallest step that you could possibly think of to get me that little tiny step toward the goal. And this is actually something that, especially for me and people like me who need to be tricked into doing something, Needs to be easier to do it than not to do it. The big trick is to pick something that's going to be teeny tiny that you get and you experience success with. So you're happy to re-engage with it. And just taking that one tiny step starts to build momentum into the project and allows you to go ahead and re-engage in an easy way and in a way that builds builds that space where you can actually start creating the work and really being in meaningful connection to it. So, for example, if I was reconnecting with the work like you were talking about, right? One of the steps that I might take is to say, I'm going to spend a minute a day thinking about the work or sitting at my desk and staring at the computer or going to a coffee shop or just some sort of something, but like just a minute. Because if you take a minute of the day, just 1 minute, and think about the project that you're working on, no matter where you are, and then when that 1 minute is done, you're done. That's another trick. You're done. You don't have to think about it again. Your work is done. You can walk away. Once you've done that, then the next day it's easier to return and do that 1 minute again. But it starts to release all of those things. It starts to move you out of this space where where you're putting pressure on yourself to get it done. Or let's say you were like, oh, I'm going to spend an hour on my project. And you spent 45 minutes on your project. Well, suddenly you've done 45 minutes more than I'm asking you to do, or 44 minutes. I'll figure out math. And then where you would have this amazing victory because you were only spending 1 minute, now you feel failure because you were like, I'm going to do an hour. So it's very important to select that step and make it something that you do and then repeat it over and over again. And as you repeat it, you slowly build the habit.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I love that. I like that first step too, of getting really, really clear about what it is that you want to create. And I do that through journaling. I have a little section in my writing software called Scrivener where I have journal to write when I'm in the writing phase, and now I'm in the editing phase. So it's journal to edit. And I just allow myself total permission to kvetch or whatever's going on, write a to-do list. It doesn't matter. And also that gets me to, oh yeah, my main character this, my main character that. And I start reconnecting to the work and acknowledging where it is and where I want to take it. And then my brain just starts lining up the next steps. I love your advice at starting small at the very smallest goal that you can conceive of. That sounds fun.
Absolutely. It's actually really, really, I hate to say normal because normal is just not for creative people. Let's call it universal.
Yes, it is universal. And I've noticed that with lots of authors. And I do notice lots of writers beat themselves up because they don't meet some imagined expectation. I'm a working writer. You're a working writer. We have to deal with who we are today, not some idealized version, while we reach for the stars in terms of trying to create something, right? We'll never really get there, but we'll get pretty close. And then I also love what you were saying, make it small, repeatable. And you said something else that I really vibed with as well.
Celebrate, celebrate your success, and then let it go. Know that you've done it for the day and you get to walk away.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so important. And I think we're practicing the muscle of getting to our work, but we're also practicing the muscle of celebrating each step, which I have learned that is way more useful than being harsh on myself for not meeting some imaginary really high bar, which we never do. And, comes from often expectations based on what we see other people do, but we never really know what other people are doing. Plus, we don't really even know how long it took for them to get there.
Right.
They're working for 30 years on that habit, and we just see the fruit of it. We don't see them working all the way into the habit.
Exactly. We don't see them having that one day where like the dog decides that he's going to chase a deer out of the yard and you spend all of your writing time for that day wandering around the neighborhood trying to find the dog. Like you don't see that.
Yeah. And you don't see how many years they might have worked in obscurity. None of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. I want to let people know that I'm pretty sure you and I met through the creativity coaching community because we
We
both
did.
training of being a creativity coach, which is a sub niche of coaching. And
Yes.
yeah, just want to let people know that that exists if you're curious about that kind of training.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk books. You are an avid reader. I want to let everyone know that you write a column for us at Writers Fun Zone, and you have all these wonderful book reviews there that I love so much. I can't read all the books, so I love reading book reviews. So I want to give a shout out to that. Um, and because we focus here on science fiction and fantasy authors, I asked for some book recommendations from you for writing books that you have for science fiction and fantasy authors. Can you tell us about those?
Sure. I think the very first one, and it's like the classic, is The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler. And that really details the hero's journey. And it's one that, I mean, you see it in every Marvel movie, you see it in all over the place, right?
Right.
And the more intriguing storyline to me these days, besides the hero's journey, because in the hero's journey, your hero ends up kind of alone,
Yeah.
tortured, sad, alone. And I'm like, not into that anymore. So I really like heroine's journey. And Gail Carriger, who's the woman who wrote like the Parasol Protectorate and all those books, she wrote a book called The Heroine's Journey, which is great because it really focuses on things like found family. You go from being alone to being a group. You grow as a human being, or all of those. I mean, not that you don't grow as a human being in the hero's journey, but it just feels like a more rewarding storyline to me. And it's what I like a lot.
Yeah.
But knowing those two journeys actually really helps you in terms of creating a plot that works
Yeah.
for your storyline. And the hero's journey is just a classic of the science fiction fantasy genre.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then in terms of actually writing science fiction and fantasy, I discovered a book a few years ago called Wonder Book by a guy named Jeff Vandermeer. And this book is gorgeous. I mean, it's just so beautifully illustrated. He grabs information from all different areas and brings them together and really uses this book as a way to engage your imagination and start breaking you out of the normal cycle of this world to a space where you can actually imagine a world that is fantastic, speculative, and all of those things. So that's the book, especially for science fiction and fantasy. I think any author could use it to great effect, but especially for science fiction and fantasy. And he does do the nuts and bolts of creating a story through to actually creating this beautiful science fiction and fantasy novel. In the next 3 months, I'm going to do a review of that book.
Dear listeners, by the time this interview airs, that review might be up. So be sure to check out La Bourgeois' column on Writers Fun Zone and also on your Substack. You post all your book reviews on your Substacks.
So the Thriving Creative is where I post my book reviews, and that's at labourgeois.substack.com. And then I have my art that I do, which is humorous and heartfelt essays about my life and history and housewifing, basically. And that is at Lesbian Housewife, and housewife is spelled with a Y, HOUSEWYFE.substack.com. So lesbianhousewife.substack.com is the best place to go.
Oh, that's fun. So fun. And yeah, I really want to celebrate you because you have a book coming out, or your book is out. Your next book.
My book is out. Yep. I just launched it mid-August. Yep. The Lesbian Housewife, bigger, broader, delightfuler.
I love it. Love it.
Yeah. And it's super fun. It's a bunch of essays that I wrote as I was getting back into this speaking of, connecting back to the work back in 2021. I was starting to connect back into my lesbian housewife work. And this book is actually the first, I don't know, 40 essays, something like that. I mean, it's a lot of essays, but built around that lesbian housewife character who I had written about for years in the 90s and 2000s, and then I'd taken a break from. And in 2021, I was like, I'm just here. Might as well start writing this again, and started up the newsletter.
And I just want to shout it out for you because I really love this work. I just find your work so hilarious in a big belly laugh kind of way, and also very relatable and very heartwarming. So that's my plug, and I really encourage folks to read it if you want a good laugh and also maybe a little tiny cry of joy, sometimes maybe sometimes sadness, but I find it really touching, all of your stories.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very kind.
So you have 2 volumes out, right? Tell us the awesome title again.
Lesbian housewife, bigger, broader, delightfuler.
Great, and where can people find your book?
So right now it's available on all of the online platforms in an ebook form. And later this year, maybe even by the time this podcast airs, it will be available in paperback as well.
Oh, wonderful. Yay. So I have one more question for you, which I like to spring on folks, but it won't be completely out of left field, which is what advice do you have for writers who want to write the future, write their own future, write their character's future, but write also maybe a little tiny snippet of humanity's future? Because I have this saying that I use sometimes in the podcast, which is when we vision what is possible, we help make it so. So the power of visualization, but also the power of putting what we really want into stories. Like we are talking about the contrast between the hero's journey. Typically, the hero is alone at the end versus the heroine's journey, where your main character gets to find their new community, which is something I've always been writing myself. And yeah, so when we vision what is possible, we help make it so. So I'm just curious if you have any advice for writers about that process.
Well, the first thing that pops into my mind is an exercise that I like to do with people who are just kind of trying to figure out where they are in life and what they want. And I call it your perfect day, writing your perfect day. So what happens is you just make a little time for yourself, sit down, and just write out your perfect day. You don't have to include everything in your perfect day, but you want to include the most important touch points for that. But it could be like get up at 10 a.m. and have a magnificent cup of coffee and enjoy time on the porch. What that does throughout as you work your way through that day is it helps you to really define what are your basic values that you want to see. Uh, Do you love being content? That's a big thing for me. I'm a big proponent of contentment as opposed to ecstatic joy. I'm like, no, no, just let me have a nice day. I do love that moment on the porch with my cup of tea in the morning. Does your art show up in that space? You want to have that. What else shows up in that day for you? Is it spending time with family and building those, taking those touch points for yourself and making sure that they are included in your story, whatever story you're writing? Those are the points of uh, concreteness with things that you have in common with your reader. Because if you can write about any world in the universe, as long as you have some sort of universal theme that's running through it, and that can help people to find those touch points in your story so they can jump into the space with you.
Oh, yes, that's so beautiful and so powerful. So powerful. I'm just thinking maybe your main character is an alien or an elf or a dragon, but you can give it those moments that you cherish, that you hold dear. And now the reader is like gravitates towards that. Your description of contentment, or maybe for some it is excited joy, or maybe for some it's adventure, which is something that I really enjoy. Or I also enjoy meandering. That to me is a great joy to go out and meander without a direction, which is full of discovery. And I get to be curious. I get to be in awe. which is probably the core there, this awe about the everyday. I love taking pictures of my neighborhood and the graffiti and the posters and the little gems that people are putting out on the street. Someone is painting hearts on little pieces of wood and tacking them onto light poles. Yes, and it's on the main commercial street here in my neighborhood, and I've been taking pictures of them very fanatically. I want to say thank you so much, Law, for coming in today and talking with us about creativity, about tips, story tips for writers, science fiction and fantasy writers, and also your book. Yes, please do check out La Bourgeois' work, also at writersfunzone.com. And I'm just going to sign off here and also say thank you very much, La, for being our guest today.
Thanks for having me.
So fun. All right, everyone, write long and prosper. And that's a wrap.